how have you seen the narratives progress as this conflict has gone since the 7th of October? Have you seen any changes?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmadu salli wa nusallim ala rasulihil kareem. Amma ba'd. So, there has been a shift, and there's been a significant shift over the last month and a half, where I think because of the constant flow of information, so even if we can play even a small part in that, of course there's been much more significant players, much more influential people who have broken down common myths, reporting, live reporting, something that has not been the case there before. If you consider all the previous, the whole conflict, even up to as recent as 2018 or 2014, 2008, 2009, these and between them, if you think about the access that people had to information over the last several decades, it's always been through mainstream media. And this is probably the first time where the conflict has blown out so much with the access of social media. So it's been there before, but the amount of access that every person has now to alternative forms of media, especially in the last 3-4 years. So I think in terms of the Israeli propaganda, it's really taking a hitting. Mm-hmm. So I think it's probably high time for everyone to keep the pressure on, to highlight the false claims, to highlight the propaganda, to discuss history, discuss all aspects of this. Because one of the things I noticed was after our last podcast, I decided to take a bit more of a deeper dive. And if you were to just sit and just discuss some of the stuff, even the notes that I've taken for this today's podcast, we could literally go into 5, 6, 7 hours, because there's so much to discuss, so much things that are going on, and it's important that people take up these different things. Mm-hmm. And this is why also it's probably the ideal time that usually Muslims have always been the defensive, because we're trying to highlight certain oppressions taking place abroad, but people are not aware of the oppression abroad. So if you said, oh, look what's happened in, like, for example, during the Iraq war, when we say this many hundreds of thousands, a million people were killed, it's very hard for the average person to get on board, because it's not in front of their eyes. As simple as that. There's not enough people telling you. So you may hear about deaths, right? Even for us, if we hear about a number saying this many thousand people were killed, it's hard to humanize that reality. But when you see it in front of your face and there's no way to avert your attention, it's very hard for people to just to buy into a narrative and say, oh, this is because of human shielding or because it's terrorism, etc. It becomes very difficult.
It's very hard for them to have apathy.
Yeah. And this is where I think the shift has happened. So I think because everyone's attention is on board now, saying, look, we're not gonna toe the common line where everyone is going down saying whatever Israel tells us, this is what we're going to go by. We're actually interested to know what is the other history, what else is happening. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is why it's probably a great time for people to start to gain access to the relevant material, academic literature. So what I'm going to show today, inshallah, is not books written by, which are like opinion pieces or even like, personal stories, although some of that aspect comes in the part of the books. But in terms of mainstream academic publications that, people can get access to, there's not been these books. I've gone through the reviews of them. There's been no, damning reviews that have questioned the whole essence of the books. These are like mainstream facts that have been established in the academia for the last few decades. So if we can carry on reading this material and distributing this information, then we can continue this pressure. And there's an important point that I want to mention. I was going to come back to at the end, but I think people normally don't get to the end, so it's probably best to mention some of the points in the beginning, is that there's this discussion of how should we as imams or Muslims in general, right? We could talk about imams more specifically, but as Muslims in general, what do we do or how should we react to when we hear Muslims doing some sort of terrorism or attack, etc., or in this case resistance? What should be our reaction? So we're very much on the defensive all the time. We're trying to defend ourselves to say, oh, this is not what the Quran says, this is what the Sunnah says. In reality, this is what's going on. And
or even saying they're not Muslim.
Yeah, so whatever excuse you make, even if it's, we can all agree it could be something wrong, but we're always on the defensive. And it was some people who are aware, who are more well aware, to give you the wider picture and say, look, this is all the other oppression that's taking place. But again, for the mainstream, it was hard because that other oppression you're talking about is too far away, something that we can't see. But now, that same defensive Muslim that we have to be careful of, who are we defending? It's probably the best time to go on the offensive. To say, what I mean by offensive here is that, let's ask you guys, right? Do you condemn the IDF? Do you condemn Israel? Let's go to Jews and ask them, what's your view of your fellow Jew? This is supposed to be a Jewish state. Can you please speak out? Because this is what Muslims were asked for the last few decades, right? That this guy is a Muslim, you know nothing about him, but he says he's a Muslim, he's doing Islam's name. Can you please condemn this guy? And if you don't, forget not condemning them. If you don't talk about them even, that's even seen as approval, or you're kind of you're complicit in the thing. So now, can we say the same now? People saying, well, what's your view regarding the IDF? What's your view regarding Israel? And we want to see you vocally speak out and say, these are extremists, either amongst us, or extremist, extreme manifestation of Judaism or of world Jewry that we don't recognize. Then that will be an equal fair footing. So when we're discussing these topics now as being defensive, this kind of information, which is now accessible to everyone, forget the books I'm talking about, just what everyone can see in front of their eyes. The idea that we should still cower in and say, defend ourselves, defend our religion, right? This is probably the ideal time where everyone can see, saying, you know what, you defend yourself, right? The US government or the UK government asking us Muslims to, condemn. I'm not condemning anything, right? Let's see the people in power condemn or things that you guys are complicit in.